So I think what we should, wow, this is really loud. Yeah. So what we should, I think, as a group, really focus in on and seek to achieve, certainly in Harlem, but we hope that it will translate to all of the communities like Harlem here in the city of New York, is everyone should have access to the internet for what they want to achieve in their lives. So the sort of internet that we're talking about is basically, it's ubiquitous, it's always on, and it's just in time everything. So that from what makes sense for you in terms of how you're using the internet, you should have that available. So that's why we have to drive this from the infrastructure standpoint, but at the same time make it, as Greta said, where it's in a place like in East Harlem, where the internet feels like East Harlem. It captures that culture, but also balances it with the new culture, but makes it so that evenly everyone can tie into what's possible with this next generation network. And sort of to get to that point in time, which is not too far away, one of the things that we've been very focused on at Silicon Harlem goes back to our inception, which was the idea of a gigabit Harlem. Why can't Harlem be that place where if we know that the technology is going there, we platform them first? So you can see that from what we're doing with RISE, what we're doing with intersection, the ideas that Nick is talking about in terms of what we're trying to achieve as far as sort of the community technology side of things, and what Nicole is talking about from this empowerment and effective way in which we want technology to be in everyone's lives, and get to what we talk about when we talk about engineering for equity. So what I want to do is just tell you 5 very exciting projects, all of which are happening in Harlem, as we've come together in what we're doing now is establishing Harlem as a tech bed for these technologies, but not simply advancing to 5G, but advancing to where everyone has access to the technology to improve their lives. So we've got a project that Dan Kilper is heading up.
Raise your hand, Dan. Right.
And it comes, we call it EAGER because these things have really long names, so you have to use acronyms. That's how the university naming process works. But this is looking at how do we play on top of what Colin has built as far as the basic infrastructure, and how do we think about how we improve that infrastructure. So the idea is that Dan leading a group at Columbia, which will also work with a group at City College, and also with Silicon Harlem, will sort of think of a dark fiber ring, a ring that isn't Verizon's network, that isn't Spectrum's network, but which provides opportunities for thinking about advances when it comes to the type of city-scale infrastructure that Colin is talking about envisioning into the future. We have another project that was just announced, and that's out of the Smart and Connected Communities programs, also at the National Science Foundation, which is driving a lot of this research work. And Ryder Foley is involved in that project, and Olivier Sylvain and Silicon Harlem once again, where this is more of the technology addressing everyone having access to the internet, but in the way that we described. It's always on, it's mobile, so as you move from your home or into the street or to your school, you've got the kind of internet that the AFSC kids would love to have right now, where they can have all the bandwidth that they want. But we drive that working with our cultural institutions. So the Apollo is involved, and the Student Museum is involved, so that it starts to reflect that part of the network, as Nicole said, where it's human. It's not just the Internet of Things. We are a finalist representing New York City, where it's, once again, Dan and his team from Columbia, as well as University of Arizona, the New York University, Rutgers, Columbia University, and the City of New York, represented by Miguel Gamiño, who will be here soon to address his thinking and his vision from the CTO's office. And that's called POWER. And that's an acronym too. I'll tell you what it stands for. It's Platform for Advanced Wireless Research. So the idea is in Harlem, we'll use school rooftops, we'll use NYChA housing, as well as some of these other more advanced nodes, and create a wireless network that's really looking at 5G and what that portends. And hovering over that network and working with us are the incumbents. So this is unprecedented to have community partnerships that include Silicon Harlem, Government Community Affairs at Columbia, community boards, but where we're actually going in the community and talking to teachers and talking to superintendents. So that's power. And then we have two more that we'd like to share with you. RISE, the Resilient Network we're so proud to be collaborating on, where East Harlem is going to get a network that's specifically focused on the uniqueness of East Harlem. And then sort of linking it all together, moving us towards this idea of a smart city paradigm where everyone takes advantage of this, is the 135 Connect. That's our 135th Street Smart City Corridor, where the idea is we want to deploy all these different technologies, from the experimental to what may be off the shelf right now in labs, and put that to work from City College on the westernmost point all the way to the Lincoln Products at Madison, and see what that allows us to do and think about using a participatory design and testing methodology that we're going to be working on with riders. So this is what we're looking at over the next 3 years, so that we'll platform Harlem on the next generation internet. So we just want to share that with you, so what you get a sense of is the ideas that you're thinking about aren't just out of the way. They're all tied into where this is going and why it's so important that all of you are here today sharing in this thinking as we move this community forward. Thank you.
Outstanding. With that, that's out. I mean, we're very proud, and you guys should be very proud too, because it takes the whole, it's not just us. This is a collective effort. Our ears are on the ground. We understand, as a lot of our partners hear me say all the time, we know why there's a check cashing place on every other corner. There's a lot of people come in our community who don't know anything about that. So when you understand how the community operates and works, you can start to think about ways to move the community forward. And so what Bruce just described, and I hope you, again, really sort of listen to it, because what it's saying is all those projects are going to happen anyway, they wouldn't have normally happened uptown. When you're looking at advanced wireless technology, that's a thing for downtown. You're talking about how to get, more people connected easily. That's some stuff that they might test in some other area. All of those projects are uptown. The power one he talked about is $100 million, in total. So you're looking at a significant investment in our area here. That doesn't happen unless our voices are at the table, and that's what we're trying to do. All right? Okay. I have a keynote speaker who originally we met breaking bread. So we said, let's have breakfast together. So I said, why don't you come up to Harlem and have breakfast? So where do you think I took him? You heard that. Sylvia's. And I knew he and I were brothers when the first thing he said to me was, Clayton, I know I'm in the right place when I see hot sauce on the table. I said, that's right. So we are BFFs now, and he's got a tremendous vision, one that we fully support in terms of seeing New York City as an inclusive and equitable city, and perhaps the smartest city in the world. And he's going to bring his remarks now. I want to introduce him as my brother from another mother, but I'll be more professional and introduce him as the Chief Technology Officer of New York City, Miguel Gamiño. Come on up. I don't know which way this goes. Oh, here we go. It's this one right here. This.
Right on. Okay, thank you.
There it is.
All right, does this work? Or do I have to stand here? Yeah, testing. Hi, my name is Greg Bishop. I'll keep that between us, brother. No, thank you so much. All that superstar talk, I was like, man, I'm in for some sweet. I was like, who's the speaker? This is amazing. I was about to take a seat and just enjoy the show. No, thank you so much. That's a true story about the hot sauce. So now everyone knows the secret. If you want me to have dinner or breakfast or lunch or whatever with you, just make sure there's hot sauce on the table and we're all good. So thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here today. Packed house, standing room only. There's still seats up here, y'all. You can come in and, people don't bite, I don't think. But I'm thrilled to be here to share with you the vision that we've been working on and getting really close to kind of finalizing. So this is a little bit of a sneak peek. to talk about kind of where we're planning to take the city in terms of the tech kind of vision and strategy. So I'm really excited to share those things. I think we have some time reserved at the end for Q&A, but I'm happy to even entertain questions along the way. I don't really need like a monologue type flow. So if you see something and you just got to say something, then just raise your hand and let's start the discussion. The sooner we get to that, the better. Anyway, Greg's right. I was previously the CIO of the best city on the West Coast, and then found my way to the best city on earth. That's right. And so, really thrilled about that. So, along the way, we learned a lot about things, and I think, truthfully, I couldn't have planned it any better to get here at this moment in time when the community like this is not just ready, but actively already participating in many of these things. So it makes my job easier to have an engaged community like this helping us shape this stuff, helping us move this stuff forward. And so our partnership with Silicon Harlem has been, predates me, but I would venture to say we're going to put some hot sauce on it. And really step it up. And one way we've already done that is we just went ahead and stole someone from Silicon Harlem. One of our newest staff on the team, Anthony, came to us from Silicon Harlem. So I think it's just Silicon Harlem being embedded in the office as opposed to larceny, but whatever. We'll just go with it however it goes. So the first thing I always like to do is put this photo on the show. So if any of you have seen my presentations recently, you've seen this photo and you know what I'm about to say. Because regardless of the rest of the content or regardless of the type of audience I'm talking to, regardless of whether this is an internal meeting with departments and agencies and city staff, or it's an external community meeting. Just yesterday, I guest lectured a class on technology and entrepreneurship at Harvard, and the slide deck always starts the same way with this photo. And the reason is that this is the reminder of why we're doing this in the first place, right? This is the cityscape. This is the way people experience the product of our work. This is what the vision should be focused on, is making this picture measurably better for the people that are living in it. So this is a reminder for ourselves and also kind of a point of clarification for those people we're talking to about why we're doing this in the first place. So I think it helps us visualize. The other thing that this photo helps me illustrate is the fact that there's already a lot of technology out there. Like we get wrapped up, a bunch of us technologists especially, get in a room and we start thinking about, we've got this, that we're on this era of technology influencing and changing the world. And that's true, but we sometimes act like it's the first time it's ever happened. And it hasn't. There's a lot of technology here. And there's a lot of technology that still functions really well here. And so while we do want to make sure we're pushing things forward and we're keeping up with the pace of change, we also need to recognize sometimes some things work. And this is a little bit of a self-realization moment. This is like step 1 of 12 for me, because I'm a technologist deep down inside. I was originally a 2-time tech founder, so I'm the guy pushing the envelope at every opportunity. And when I kind of went on, I'm on this, my joke is that I'm on this public service sabbatical. I got talked into doing my civic duty in my hometown in Texas, then went to San Francisco, and now here. And what that chapter of my life has done for me is given me better appreciation and recognition for how important the role of government is. The decisions we're making, the things we're responsible for, are often life safety. And if not life safety, still dealing with other people's money. And dealing with things that, like Greg's mission, can change the trajectory of a family, of a neighborhood, of a community, of the whole city, if done well. And if done poorly, can change the trajectory of a family or a neighborhood or a city. So the stuff we're doing is really, really important, and that weighs heavy. And so I say all that just to say we have to take a responsible approach to pushing the envelope. We have to make sure we understand how our decisions are going to impact people's lives. And so that's, I know that was a lot of words for one photo, but there's a saying about that. And I think that's what this represents. We can all kind of take our own personal perspectives of what a photo like this means to us, and we have to figure out how to make that meaning better. Click. The other thing is to just fully recognize openly that this digital revolution is happening, whether we participate in it or not. And given everything I just said about how kind of impactful this change can be on real people's real lives, we can't just sit back and watch it happen, right? Technology is going to influence our society, our neighborhoods, it'll influence our culture, all kinds of things that are really important to the fabric of a city. And we have to my argument is we have to lean into it. We have to step up and participate in shaping how it happens so that it happens in a way that is positive and on our terms, strengthening and supporting our values and our priorities for a stronger, more inclusive community in New York City. The thing that, as I was coming to New York, I was kind of taking stock of what New York was about and kind of understanding, trying to get myself baptized in the culture and the vision and kind of what was going on in New York City. And one of the things that really stood out to me was this One New York plan. And the reason it stood out to me wasn't just that it's about, I don't know, 2 inches thick. Greg reads it every night so that he's ready in the morning when the mayor calls. But what has impressed me about that is it is that guiding light. Because if you look at the things that it promotes, that it identifies as priorities, not only have those things survived several years, in fact, they've only become more important. And so I found it very kind of reassuring that we had kind of a citywide thing that we could point to that should be the guiding principles for what we were doing. So we bake this in kind of similar to the photo. We always look at these angles. Are we making these things better with the thing that we're talking about today? And if not, then let's talk about something else. The other thing that I kind of took inventory of in New York City that was liberating is this culture of being bold, being ambitious. And the analogy that I draw on pretty frequently is the subway system. And I'm thinking about the subway system when it was initially an idea and just initially being built and thought of. And think about back then what it must have sounded like for someone to stand on a stage like this or in a room full of constituents and say, listen, I have this idea. We're going to dig a hole. We're going to put some rails in it. We're going to put a train car on those rails, and we're going to bury it. And people are going to crawl down some set of steps and get on that train and let us shuttle them under the river. Sounds like a great idea, right? We couldn't survive without it today. In fact, we complain about it not functioning as well as it should, even though it's probably one of the best functioning public transportation systems in the country. But we're pushing because we've become so acclimated to its existence. And so, and it's not that many years. We're not talking hundreds of years ago, right? We're talking inside some people's lifetime that this has really developed. And now it's gone from crazy idea to just daily fact. And so some of us in this technology game, particularly on the connectivity conversation, are encountered with the similar thing. We talk about, well, I have this crazy idea. Every single home should have fiber. And people are like, yeah. I'm here to tell you that it won't be that long from now when we will look back on it like we look on the subway. Be like, of course there's fiber in every home. What are you talking about? Or wireless, or whatever the medium is. I'm not even hung up on the actual kind of the physical form factor of the connectivity, but that everybody in New York City has access to the internet will be thought of as bold and ambitious today, and maybe some people will say crazy, and in very short time will be commonplace. And so I took all of that in, and I've been here in New York almost a year. In fact, I think I officially moved here Thanksgiving, but I must have been really excited about it because Facebook reminded me like 3 days ago that 1 year ago I posted this this article about how I was coming to New York City. So we're creeping up somewhere between 3 days ago and Thanksgiving on my 1-year anniversary, officially. And so over the course of that year, we have taken all of that stuff that I just described as kind of the guiding principles, the real objectives and reasons for why we're doing it, and we thought about how would we kind of bring technology to bear to forward those things. What would the priorities be? What would the categories of focus be? And then within those categories, what would we actually try to accomplish in the immediate and near term? And then what would be the longer, more ambitious objectives? And that's kind of the approach that we took. And we ended up on these 5 categories. The first sits on top and sits outside this box on purpose. And Greg mentioned a tech talent pipeline program that's in his agency. And there's other talent-related components in other agencies. So the reason it sits out there like that is to indicate it's not inside the office of the CTO box. We don't own it unilaterally, but we're promoting it as maybe next to connectivity, the most single fundamentally important raw material of the technology industry and the economy, the more broad hyphen tech economy in New York City. What they care about every single time is talent. I mentioned yesterday I was at Harvard. One of the sessions I had there was in a room full, we did like this round circle kind of fireside chat with a bunch of technology founders, a bunch of men and women who are starting tech companies. And we had this open debate about where would you launch your startup, where would you move your startup? And we started talking about priorities and things, and we went through this exercise of I wish. It was like they were telling me, I wish New York would do this to make it more kind of inviting or make more sense for me to move my startup to New York. And almost to a person, it was a talent angle. If they didn't just say talent outright, it was some aspect of it. Workforce development, economic development, will my employees be able to afford to live here? How will my employees get to and from work? But it was always about the talent piece. One way or another, it came back to talent. And so a guy like Greg and other people in the city putting more and more attention to this is really, really important as a core fundamental shift that we have to accomplish in New York City. I think Greg mentioned it, but we often describe New York City workforce as the largest diverse workforce in North America. And you think about how powerful that is. The caveat there is we collectively have to make sure to do things that we can to prepare that workforce to participate in the future of work, what those new wave of small businesses or large businesses might be, and what types of talent they're going to need. But we've got this really rough diamond that no other city can claim, and no other city can manufacture. And so we just have to make sure we're polishing it properly. And then the other 4 are inside my office that we very specifically lead, and I'll get into a little more detail on these now. So the other bare fundamental thing is connectivity. Mentioned it before. I know I'm preaching to the choir here. This is a room full of people who understand it, so I won't get into a lot of trying to explain to you why this matters. But what we're trying to do in New York City is figure out the best way forward to make sure that every single New Yorker, all 8.5 million people, not 8.3 million, and not 8.1 million, and certainly not 7 million, but 8.5 million, every single New Yorker has access to affordable, high-speed broadband at their home and in Greg's kind of line of work in their business. And the fundamental reason why is so that they have the ability to participate in modern society. It's just that simple, plain. So we're putting a lot of thought into how we might play a role in that. And there's lots of different versions of what that might look like, how the city government would contribute or participate in making that come to reality. And we're in the process of exploring that. Along the way, we also want to make sure that we are protecting people's we call digital rights. We want to make sure that as we are bringing everybody to this kind of euphoria of the future and bringing them online in the connected world, that they're not having to sacrifice their privacy or their digital safety in exchange. What's happened this is not intended to be political statement, but I'm just going to say this one thing out loud, which is that the moves recently around digital privacy and net neutrality in DC are very troublesome. They're moving us in the wrong direction. And going back to that bold leadership kind of virtue of New York City is that we have been very pointed in our position on that. So pointed that we led some lobbying effort in DC that we made very public. We have organized or helped organize over 60 cities to sign on a letter in support of these concepts, and those cities representing north of 26 million people in the United States, all behind that same notion. But we also know that we have to do what we can locally. So we are baking into our principles of broadband the concept that you should have the ability to maintain and manage your privacy and your digital environment for the purpose of kind of public safety in a digital way. What we call NYC Forward is our smart cities and IoT space. And one more comment on the previous slide. It's also, none of the rest of these slides matter if that first slide doesn't happen. In fact, I'll say it even more pointedly, all of the rest of these slides could be terribly dangerous if we don't get that first slide right, and I'll explain why. If people aren't connected, then the things that we want to do to make the connected environment better will only be serving some people. And that's why connectivity is about all 100% of New York and not just part of it. Not 90%, not 95%. Those metrics might make sense on somebody's P&L. They might make sense on a balance sheet somewhere. They don't make sense when we represent all 5 boroughs and everyone who lives in them. So what we want to do in the smart cities and IoT space is bring that opportunity and that potential to life. And what I mean by that is our principle or our strategy around smart cities is that we define the city being smart when it can function for the benefit of its constituency in a smart fashion across the silos. And I don't mean that to be a bunch of fancy words. What I mean to say is, if you're a city with a smart lighting project, congratulations, you're a city with a smart lighting project. You're not a smart city. If you're a city with a smart trash can project, congratulations, you're a city with a smart trash can project. And those things are good and they're steps forward. But before we can really call ourselves a smart city and put a period at the end of that, we have to make sure that all those connected pieces of infrastructure, all those smart projects can talk to each other the same way that the humans interact with them. When you're walking down the street, you toss something in the garbage can, and then you cross through a crosswalk, and then you get in your car at a parking space. You've interacted with several different agencies and several different departments without thinking about it. And we need to make sure that the technology can attempt to transcend those barriers similarly. So what we want to do is curate, commission, construct an IoT platform that's open source and open access so that we have the ability to create those data exchanges between those currently disconnected smart projects, and for the purpose of creating interoperability that people will actually feel in the way that they kind of function their daily lives in the city. The third area that we are responsible for is what we call NYC Digital. And this is all about how do we create digital alternatives and, frankly, improvements to city service delivery through the use of digital tools and digital alternatives. At some point, hoping to get to a point where we're a digital-first city, where when we build new services, we think of them digitally first, and certainly create analog, components to that for the realities of the way people will get those services from us. But we want to think about them in the digital fashion. One thing that's really important for me to say here is that philosophically, our thinking around digital isn't just for conveniences for people with iPhones in their pockets. That's going to happen, and that's fine, and that's great. But the real potential of a digital government, the real potential of thinking digital first, is equity and access. So I'm going to take you through a little journey with me real quick. single mother, has a couple kids, has a couple hourly paid jobs, qualifies for some programs that the city has available. That taxpayers, for the purpose of this story, I'll call them investors, have made a choice to put money into for an outcome, right? We vote, we say we think affordable housing or whatever is an important part of our city. We as taxpayers / investors put money into those programs, and those programs are to deliver a return. But then those very customers that we're targeting, again, think of it this like a business. The very customers that we're targeting with those investments, we make it very difficult sometimes for them to get access to us. So if we were really a for-profit commercial enterprise, we would be hacking that problem first. It's called user-centered design, right? Uber didn't launch and then make it really hard for you to download the app. None of these, so we have to think about it in that way. And so if we can digitize ourselves well, then we'll make it easier for that single mother to not have to take an unpaid day off of work, navigate public transit, arrange for daycare, come down to City Hall. She probably doesn't do it very often, so she doesn't know which office she's supposed to go to. I guarantee you she's going to stand in the wrong line the first go round, and she's going to have to come back tomorrow and do it all over again. Instead, what if she could do it when it's convenient for her? She doesn't have to take that paid time off. She doesn't have to separate herself from her kids. She doesn't have to navigate the labyrinth of city government just for us to make the investment that the taxpayers / investors have seen fit to put money into. So for me, digital is about that. It's about transforming our relationship in a positive way with the people that we are built to serve. And then last, this is really exciting. We had some announcements very recently. Late last week, we announced the program initially, and then early this week, we had an event in Brownsville. But we've launched something called NYCx. And this is all about changing the relationship we have with the industry and the relationship maybe that the industry has with the community. Ultimately, to inform building better products that serve everybody, or at least don't disserve people in the community. So it's our opportunity to really strengthen kind of the broader values of the city as technologists are thinking about what they might build. The other element is inviting them in to help us fix our biggest problems. And so we've done this in a couple ways by way of what we call challenges. Some are moonshot challenges and some are collab challenges that are neighborhood up, and I'll talk more about that in a minute. But it's about inviting these big thinkers and these technologies in to help us solve problems that really matter to people. Instead of building another cold press juicer or whatever. I didn't want to call them out by name, man, come on. But maybe that, it's not because they're not talented, but maybe they just weren't presented with a really important problem that was informed by people who identified the pain point. So I think arguably we can contribute as much to the technology economy as they might contribute to us. We might give them real, durable, hard problems to solve that could turn into really valuable, important companies in the future, and we might get some of our biggest challenges addressed in the meantime. And then a really important element of this is a technology leadership council that we have established that is really unique. It's not your typical advisory council where we've assembled a bunch of logos on a sheet of paper and said, we've got all this representation here. We reached out to specific individuals. So yes, on our council are companies represented, but we reached out to particular individuals at those companies intentionally. So people like Tim Armstrong and Beth Comstock, Kevin Ryan in the New York scene, but even from Silicon Valley, Keith Kroc and some of these other chief executive type and chairman type leaders in the tech industry are individually directly committed to this council. The other most important element of that is we have community voices at that same table, not at a separate table. So there's not like the adults table and the kids table. One table, same chair. And on that community voice is our very own brother from another mother, Clayton. And Russell Simmons, who some of you might have heard of once upon a time. So it's people like that, right, that are going to not just represent the community, but in a very, in a very important, uncompromising way, right, with a degree of integrity behind them that requires respect in that conversation. So we've been very intentional about who we've asked to join this, and I think that, again, not only might we gain really important insights into government for what we're thinking about, and we might provide from government really important insights into the tech industry and to the community and vice versa, but I think what we might have also stumbled upon is maybe the only city, the only government on earth, potentially, that could have accomplished the relationship that we're going to end up strengthening directly between the technology leadership and the community. DC couldn't arrange this. San Francisco hasn't arranged this. I was there. And so maybe it's just because New York City has the special sauce it takes, that hot sauce, that it takes to convene that conversation, right? And so think about it in our NYCx plan. It's like it's one sentence in a long list of things that we're working on that we think are really important, but maybe that might be the most important. That might be the force multiplier. That might be the thing that generates exponential impact when Clayton and Tim might generate an authentic relationship directly, and that exchange starts to happen even outside of our purview. So super, super excited about that. We have some additional announcements coming fast and furious very soon. So if you don't follow me on Twitter, do it right now. And my brother and Silicon Harlem, we're all sharing the responsibility to spread the good word. But we've got some more important announcements coming very soon around other elements of this program going forward. Here's my announcement. Sorry, I screwed that up. We did get some really important attention from the press, I think for all those reasons, because we've started something that hasn't been started before. We talk a lot about the haves and have-nots of technology and the problems with diversity or the absence of it. They're really good at identifying the problems, and I think we are just leaning into trying to solve it. We're just getting on with it, right? And so I think people are paying attention because of the way that we're doing this. Another really important, exciting element of this is the creation, the ability for us to leverage, again, very uniquely, maybe in a way that only New York could, physical urban spaces that can be used as test beds, as points of experimentation and co-creation, co-development with the industry. And so those venues will take different forms and different shapes based on what we need to do at the time. And that's one thing we have available to us in New York that other cities don't have the luxury of, is we have really, really dense urban centers, and we have, disadvantaged neighborhoods, and we have waterfront, and we have open green space like Governor's Island. We've got a really, wealth of diversity, even of environments and people and problems that we can offer to the industry. And the story I tell on this usually is, technologists, all of this is also about inserting ourselves in the tech conversation sooner. Because I call my buddies at the startups and I say, what are you working on? And so sometimes they'll tell me, sometimes they won't. And then 6 years later, it's ready to go to production, right? So 6 years later, they developed this autonomous thing, or they've developed this flying thing, or they've developed some other thing. And in their mind, it's ready to go to production. They started out in a clean lab somewhere on Stanford or Columbia's campus, and then they've tested it in a kind of controlled environment, and then they take it to the deserts of Arizona, and they fly these things around or do whatever they want to do where they can't hit anything. And then, if you're lucky, they test it in suburbia. And if they get that far, then they're like, oh, we're ready for Lower Manhattan. Yeah, right. Right on. And so but what happens is they do that, and then we are caught off guard. We're forced onto our heels. And so the government doesn't always want to be the obstacle. But I expressed earlier, that we take our role really critically. We take it really seriously, because we're protecting people's interests and sometimes people's lives. So I tell my startup friends, if it took you 6 years to develop it, what makes you think I can re-regulate in 6 days or 6 hours like you'd like? Right? So you complain about government being slow, and in reality, not always. It's just the nature in which it comes to us that makes it feel like that. And so what I said is, why don't we get involved together sooner? And then I use the same runway that you do. And maybe we meet more closely at the end, and we're mutually prepared to engage in that disruption. And my argument to my VC friends is that I'm making those companies more valuable. I'm making them come to market faster, sooner, and better informed. So it doesn't have to be one or the other. It doesn't have to be good for the community or profitable. It can be both. We just have to, but that takes work, and that takes collaboration, and it takes conversation, it takes trust, it takes a really important strengthening of the relationship, and that's, from a philosophical standpoint, what we're working on with NYCx also. So I talked a little bit about the challenges. The announcements that we made is our first Moonshot Challenge is around connectivity. Again, I've already explained to you why I think that's number one thing that we have to accomplish. And so we're taking advantage of two things. One, Governor's Island is a greenfield. And two, Governor's Island needs connectivity. It's a greenfield. It's a desert, right? It's both. And so we have issued a challenge inviting the best and brightest. And this could be I'm saying this out loud right now. This invitation is not discriminatory. This invitation is extended to the incumbents in the broadband space and the startup, the two guys in a garage somewhere or two gals in a garage somewhere that have an idea for how to deliver connectivity over some new technology. It's an invitation to everybody. All we care about is finding the best way to deploy broadband, high-speed performance, very quick delivery or implementation, and very low cost. We want to discover what new ways might be out there to think about that. And so if this is online, you can go nyc.gov/NYCx challenges, and you can read up on it. You can contact us for more details, and you can put your hat in the ring right now. The other thing we've done is over the last year, we had several workshops occurring in Brownsville, Brooklyn. And we were working with them on trying to identify bottom up what the priorities are of that particular neighborhood. And this all came to kind of a culmination on Monday when we had gone through this process, identified these issues, and had an event with these great people, thinkers, developers, community activists, and leaders in the neighborhood to launch what we call collab challenges, starting in Brownsville. And these are two of the priorities that they had identified. Greg and I actually were at a town hall just a day or two after we had this announcement in Brownsville, and much of the discussion in that Brownsville town hall was exactly on these issues. So it was really good validation for me, frankly, that even in a broader setting in that neighborhood, that we were indeed fortunate enough to identify things that mattered most to that community. And so we're inviting, similarly, the biggest or smallest, brightest thinkers in the tech space to help us work on solving these particular issues. One is zero waste and shared space. I think Greg actually taught me this, that Brownsville is the number one or number two most densely populated public housing neighborhood in the city or the country. And so suffice to say that when you say zero waste and shared space, by default, you're mostly talking about common areas in public housing as that shared space. And so what ways could we think about not just the physical nature of increasing recycling and things like that, but how do we really think about and lean into the human element of this? Why are people acting, or why is human behavior occurring a certain way in these communities that might not be occurring in other communities? So really digging deep on the reason that this is happening and how we might help solve it. The other is to make the corridors, the business corridors of Brownsville safe at night so that they thrive, so that they activate, so that people don't feel like they can't be out there mixing and mingling with their neighbors taking advantage of business in Brownsville after hours. And so this is, going to seriously involve elements of lighting and different things that we can do to create a sense of safety in these environments. But again, there's a ripple effect here. We make those environments safer and more conducive to small business, and then Greg now has a whole new kind of venue for small business growth, and on and on and on. So again, all the way full circle to that original picture, if we're focused on the right issues, then technology is a contributor to the broader mission. It's not an investment in technology or small business. It's one and the same. We all end up pushing on the same levers if we've identified the focal points and the problem statements correctly. We, as a bonus, just because I came from it this morning, we actually presented these two in particular, these two neighborhood challenges to this class at Harvard, and out of that class, we generated 46 ideas. They were given these challenges with I think a couple days notice, and nothing but the challenge statement and the press releases, no other information. And we got 46 they were asked to present their idea on one slide, and we have a slide deck of 46 slides, 46 different ideas to help promote these things. And so if that's not evidence that, number one, bright minds care, and number two, that we can generate volume, content that will likely surface really new, important ideas, that is certainly one. Now, we're not expecting Harvard students to solve all these problems, but we expect that the neighborhood itself, residents in the neighborhood, the kids that are there that are developing the VR stuff that you saw on my slide, all of those people are going to have really bright ideas. And so I think we're going to see a lot of activity generating from maybe unconventional places to help solve these problems. So with that, that's my monologue. That's kind of the big picture. That's the vision. Those are the things that we've prioritized, the reasons that we've prioritized them, the assets and the tools that we believe we have available to us to make sure that in New York City, technology is for people. It's not just technology for technology's sake. So thank you.
So we're riding on a tight schedule, but if there's anyone that might have one or two questions for Miguel, I'm quite honored to be selected to serve with Jeremy and the team on NYCx, and I see this as a great opportunity for all of us to have our voice at the table, as Miguel mentioned. I'm going to quickly ask you to accept one of our coveted gifts, which is a pair of Silicon Harlem socks.
Nice. Right on. This will go. Look at this. This will go perfect right here.
Perfectly. Anyone? Okay. Who has a question? Right over here.
So, yeah, right here. Do we have another mic?
Well, we have one with Bigelow. Bigelow has one, and who else?
I got the mic.
Okay, we'll do the mic first and bring the mic to you next.
Love the brainstorming, love the process, love the initiatives. Bigger picture question, if we're since we are trying to accomplish equity and affordability, does it make sense for the internet for the country to be more of a utility and to go in that path?
And who do you work for? No, I'm serious.
He's an old banker.
Okay, all right. That's an open debate, right? I don't. This is unvarnished response. I don't get caught up in the words and the nomenclature, frankly. I know a lot of people, lawyers mostly. That's why I thought you were either a lawyer or worked for an ISP. I don't get wrapped up in the terminology as much. I know there's legal reasons for it. I know there is, designating it as a utility means something very specific to certain people. And maybe for that reason, I don't really get too leaned into that yet. I'm here making it super, super clear. What I care about is that everybody in New York has a safe, affordable way, high-speed way to get on the internet so they can participate in modern society, period. How that happens is TBD. Very honestly, from my perspective. Can the carriers do it on their own? Maybe. One would ask, if so, why haven't they? But not to pick on them, to say maybe because their mission is specific, it's not their fault that it doesn't make sense to go some places, and that might be where we have to participate in that. That's my broader argument, is that it's going to take a mixture of interest and a mixture of assets and a mixture of thinking to figure out how to solve this complex problem. I don't think if you just claimed it to be a utility, that overnight the problem solves itself. That will solve some things and generate other things. I think we need to think about the mission and then think creatively and openly about how we can come together to accomplish that mission.
All right, we're going to take one more question from whoever Miguel picks. Okay,
had
we're
his
going to
hand
do Oz, and then we'll do this young lady over here.
If I keep
Then
them
I
quick,
gotta
if I
cut
keep
off.
the answers punchy, maybe we can get a couple extras in.
Yeah, keep it punchy.
Yeah.
Punchy.
Hey,
Of course, I could stay here all day. I don't know about you.
Oh, well, in that case.
so I'm working with the Cyber Workforce Alliance, and we're trying to actually put curricula together at John Jay for the next generation, because there's about a whole of 2 million cyber jobs by 2019. So one, how do we get engaged in something like this? Because I could bring Rain and everyone else. Two, what are you doing in terms of public-private partnerships to facilitate some of this education?
So the getting engaged piece is you can reach out to us directly. Either I give you contact information before I leave. My team is right up here front row, so you can corner them. And so that's how you can get connected with us, and we can figure out the right point of engagement. In terms of public-private partnerships, I think they'll take many forms, right? I don't think there's a template or a one-size-fits-all kind of approach to the P3 idea. Depends on what you're trying to solve. Like I just said with the broadband problem, if we get together and we really talk about what we're trying to do and who is appropriately responsible or interested for different elements of that, then that should inform the way that a partnership is constructed. Again, this is a very thematic thing for me. I know I'm not punchy now. The very thematic thing for me is be honest and very clear about what the problem statement is, and then work on the solutions. If you jump too quickly to even presupposing it should be a public-private partnership, you've kind of taken some things potentially off the table. So I think we need to still be focused on what we're trying to accomplish first, and then let the solution fit.
We had a question over here. Bring the mic to this young lady here.
Can you hear me? Oh, there I am. Hi, everyone. Hello. Good afternoon. Hello, thank you for that. The slide that you had, NYC Digital, brought to my mind something that's happening in my community. So I'm from way down deep in Red Hook, about an hour and a half away. And what they're doing there is New York City Housing Authority has transitioned some of their application, right, their renewal applications, online. And that's great, right? They're coming into the 21st century, and isn't that wonderful? It's digitized. But here are the problems. One is that we have a population in NYCHA who doesn't know how to access the internet, who doesn't have a way to access the internet, who have no clue what the hell is going on when they sit in front of a computer. Number two is it's not translated. So if someone speaks a language other than English, you know, our Spanish speakers, our Chinese speakers, they have no way of knowing what is going on. And then they're being penalized for not being able to complete the applications. So it's really troubling to be at a community-based organization and having people coming in, flooding into the doors, wondering where they can get help. And they really do need support. There should be support centers set up so these people can get the help to complete these applications. What would you suggest we do in situations like that?
So one is on the connectivity front, I should have been more clear. Literacy is a baked-in component to our broadband thinking. At Queensbridge, for example, you know, we're working on Wi-Fi service there, but also stood up a lab that was led by seniors from that community to help provide literacy and education options for the community. Kind of it's serving itself, right? So those are really good models that we have I would say, tested in those environments and now need to figure out how to scale them out. In our plan, we have significant partnership with all the library systems, all 5 boroughs, to expand literacy components. So far, so specifically as to say that we will have, I forget the date off the top of my head, but by a certain date in a very short term, somebody at every single library that will be able to provide at least basic kind of skills and information around digital privacy concerns and things like that. So it's a complicated kind of set of things we have to deal with, but literacy is absolutely one of the primary points that we are including in our planning. The literacy is also not just, as you described, knowing how to use it, but also knowing how its value. A parent, a decision maker in a household might choose, for example, to pay for something else for their household of discretionary types, right? That they might do instead of internet because they don't fully understand how important it is to their child's education process or whatever. And I don't indict them for that, right? I think we have to make sure that we help make clear how important it is for digital literacy to occur in those households. So we're really working on that as part of that, making sure that, again, going back to my original point, that if we bring these digital tools to the world properly, fully informed and fully connected, then we will narrow those gaps, not widen them. And so what you're expressing is kind of evidence of what I'm talking about that we need to make sure we're paying attention to.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm so sorry, but we're going to have to respect Miguel's time, as well as there's 2 great panels about to happen.
Yep.
So do you want to make any final comments?
No, just thank you for 2 things. For inviting me to share this with you and staying awake.
After lunch?
And then also for all the work you're doing to contribute to moving this stuff forward. It's, as I expressed in the beginning, it's the activity of the community that really makes this job easier. So thank you very much for all that you're doing to help move some of these things forward with us.
We don't always get to see and hear and feel the vision. You can sort of read about it and hope you get a press release or something like that. But when one of our government officials are willing to come into Harlem and share a vision as specific as he was, let's give the man a very, very big, large applause.
Thank you. Thank you.